Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the warm welcome. It's really nice to be here in India, and I am first and foremost love to be here with a bunch of ladies. So thank you very much for the very warm welcome, and also a couple men who are here in the front, of course, also. So thank you to you too. But I just wanted to mention, it's funny that women's and men's brains are wired differently. I don't think anybody should be worried about that or think twice about that or feel bad about that. That's just the way things are. When I've been up on the space station, people have asked me a funny question. They said, so, is it different with men on there up on the space station than with women on the space station? And I said, I don't know. I've only been there with women. It's only, it's, when I'm up there are women up there. So, maybe the place is a little cleaner, but I don't know if that's not the case when women aren't there. But, and I'll have to also mention, of course, give credit to my lovely husband. It's always nice to have someone who's a partner who has a different brain than you have. And he certainly reminds me that I have a different brain than he has. And I remind him too when, I'm picking up his shoes and things like that around the house and reminding him that, I run the household and he gets it eventually. But, in my years of growing up, I have been in interesting scenarios, and I think that have, led me to become potentially successful in the field that I chose. I didn't get here and become an astronaut just straight path. My path to becoming an astronaut was very varied, and I think that's probably true with most people, particularly when you're graduating from high school. Are you sure what you want to do? Maybe an issue with kids in the United States graduating from high school, feeling a little bit of pressure. I'm not sure how it is here in India, but feeling pressure that their parents are expecting them to know what they want to do, or schools are and their teachers are expecting them to know what they want to do. And I certainly was not one of those kids. But at least I left the path open by being a good student. First and foremost, the task that's at hand in front of you, trying to do well at what you're doing. So, being a good student opens doors for anything that you possibly want to do. I think kids nowadays don't realize that everything they learn in high school is not the end. You're going to actually get a little smarter. Unfortunately, I don't have any children, but I have a lot of friends who have, kids in high school who at that age, of course, think that they know everything and they're telling their parents how it all goes. But of course, we were all in that time frame, and we realize now that, maybe we just didn't know everything at that moment in time. But you know enough to get you in the door, know enough to get you a higher education if that's what if that's what your dream follows. Know enough to try to learn a job that's going to allow you to live on your own and be able to support yourself. And that's I think the primary first goal of becoming successful. I went to a college that was mostly men. I think there was 10% were women and 90% men when I went there. It's changed at the Naval Academy. It's changed, and now it's probably about 20% women and 80% men. So the numbers have increased quite a bit, which is pretty neat. I went there, though not because I raised my hand and said that's exactly what I wanted to do. I went there because I was looking for a school, and actually I was looking for an education that wasn't going to cost a whole lot for my parents. And I knew that they were, going through some financial times, and, that would be tough for all of us. So I was on my own, trying to figure out how to solve that problem. And I think there's a lot of kids out there who are faced with college costs and wondering how they're going to make it through and how they're going to find their way. You have to be creative. I wasn't really ready. I was, an Indian girl and had nice long hair. I wasn't really ready to get my hair chopped off, but that's one of those things that started that I had to do as soon as I joined the Naval Academy. And it grows back, which is good for the most part. Now I'm getting older and I'm worrying about it not growing back, but I think it will. So, that wasn't my very first choice, but I went there and I met a lot of really neat people, women and men. And particularly the women who I went to school with there, a number of years later, a couple decades later, a lot of us are still really good friends because we all went through something that was a little bit tough, pretty hard. I think when you go through something a little bit hard and difficult, you tend to bond with the people around you who have the same background. So of course, the women who I went through with 25 years ago, like I said, we're still in contact with each other and wondering where each other are, and we've all done different things in our lives. So even after graduating from the Naval Academy, I had dreams of becoming something different than what I did. I was wanting to be a Navy diver because I was a swimmer, but I ended up being a pilot because that was what was left. The diver jobs were gone, and so there was a pilot opportunity open, so I said, oh, I'll try this. Now, I had never done that before, and another point that I wanted to bring up is getting out there and trying things and not being afraid to try things. I'd never flown an airplane, and I didn't know if I was going to be good at it, but I tried, and I learned, and I understood, and I found out what people did wrong. I found out what people did right, and I just tried to do the best that I could, and had the opportunity to then fly helicopters. Again, something I had never ever done, but hey, let's try it, and why not? And at that point in time, I think the press was asking me about women in combat. We didn't have women in combat in the United States, and so a lot of the flying that we were doing was in support roles. But still, there was again even a smaller number. I think there was 4 women in a squadron of about 60 or 70 people. So the numbers were even smaller. And you're of course you get to the squadron and the guys are all doing their own thing. They're all bonding together, and there's a couple of girls here, and you're really not part of the cool gang because you're a girl. But you try to just make sure that you're qualified at what you're doing. You make right decisions based on the right things to do. And make sure you're confident and competent at what you do. And it's amazing how people gain respect for you in a group in that manner. And I'm sure everybody in this room is part of or can identify with the things that I'm saying. You've probably been in groups where you've probably been one or two women in the field, but you just have to make sure that you know everything that you need to know. Be qualified with what you're doing, and remember to make the right decisions that you can go home and sleep with at night, not worry about compromising because of trying to be friends or anything like that. You're just trying to do the right thing. And I was really lucky. I had some great opportunities in that squadron. I actually got to become what they call a detachment officer in charge, and I got to take 2 helicopters and 30 guys out on a boat down to Florida after a hurricane had hit Florida, and distribute supplies for all of the people there who were suffering from the natural disaster. And that was pretty motivating to me. That was pretty neat. I really I think that was that step up in confidence for me. Like, wow, I could actually be in charge of all these guys. And, we got like 17-year-old kids who just graduated from high school, guys, all the way up to 40-year-old men, chiefs in the Navy who are having to pay attention to you. But in your mind, you know what you're supposed to do. You know what they're supposed to do. You know how to make that plan, and so you do it. And you also don't lose track of that's people that you're working with, right? So every now and then have a pizza party for everybody, and do something that's going to be social for everybody and get everybody back together and remind everybody that you're just a group of people. You're not just a machine that's doing something. And I think, honestly, that is the ability for particularly women to identify with how people are feeling, getting a sense of how the group is acting, how the group is forming, how the group is progressing. I think that's a huge strength that we have. I don't know if you all feel that way too, but I certainly feel that way. The astronaut office, I feel the same way. We have I'm getting better. Now the astronaut office is about 30% women. So I think in my career, this is getting better and better and higher percentages. So I got more ladies to ask their opinions of how things go. But in the astronaut office, it's the same thing. I was the deputy chief of the astronaut office for a while, and I think the main goal there was looking at stepping back and looking at, command climate, as we call it, morale of the whole group, and finding out where the problems are, and actually walking around and talking to people and trying to figure out, what was making people upset, what's not making people upset, how do you make this group a team, where are opportunities fallen short, where has management fallen short to help people's development. I think those are the things that, as a woman, I think we inherently do a little bit better, maybe because we're moms at heart, right? So you want to take care of everybody. And I think that paid a lot of dividends. Not any of those things in space, but just being able to work with the group like that, I think some of my greatest accomplishments were just compliments from our astronaut office saying, it was a very good time when you were the deputy chief of the office. So I think that, to me, means even more than some of the space accomplishments. And that allows you, I think, to be able to do these space accomplishments or whatever accomplishments are in your realm that you're going to do. I think if you're conscientious of the people around you, how they feel and how they're acting and how the whole group is progressing, it allows you to actually capitalize on that and become a better team player. I felt that was definitely true on my second flight. I was the commander of the International Space Station. Of course, we had other Americans, we had Russians, we had Japanese crew members, trained with a European and trained with a Canadian as well. So people from all sorts of cultures. I was the one woman in that little group of people, and it was a small group of people. But I think I was the one, I think inherently, again, trying to figure out, hey, what is making people happy? What is making the team progress? How do we make sure everybody has a job? I'm not doing all the job myself. I could never do all the job myself. How do you distribute that to other people? Another team that we have that's associated with flying is the mission control team, and that's people from all over the world. Also, mission control in Houston, in Russia, in Japan, in Canada, and Europe. And those are also the team. So when you're in space and you're the voice coming from the International Space Station, which generally the commander was, you're talking to all of those people, and those people can feel your attitude. They can feel when you're annoyed and mad. They can feel when you're happy. And to be, again, conscientious of that, which I think we're a lucky gender to actually be aware of that, to be conscientious of that, and then bring all of those people from all those different control centers along with you in a very happy manner. Like, again, one of the best compliments I ever got was you guys were a very fun crew. There was a very great increment, 6 months of just a lot of fun. Everybody wanted to come to work. So I think that's huge, and I think every lady in this room brings that to the table, and don't underestimate that. Maybe that's not the most technical thing that you bring to the table, but you bring that teamwork to the table. And like I said, it allows us to take on jobs which are not necessarily in the expected realm. It's okay because you bring a lot to the table. So I've had a very fortunate career. I've been very lucky. Been in, I think, the right place at the right time. Wasn't always my plan. I always wanted to be a veterinarian, and I have had dogs my whole life, and I love animals. So maybe I still have a chance to do that too. Part of becoming an astronaut, of course, and the things that we're doing nowadays is talking about STEM. To STEM opportunities for everybody across the board. And it doesn't matter if you're a girl or a boy, a man or a woman, science, technology, engineering, and math are huge goals of our organization at NASA and all throughout the country. And I push that out to this organization as well, who's obviously emphasizing that. I think women being part of the STEM fields is allowing them to do all sorts of different opportunities out there, which it's huge. Like I said, we bring something different to the table in all of those fields, and I think it's it's definitely time and necessary for that. So part of NASA's goal and mission is discussing the things that we do, right? So I think everything that we do has to do with science and technology, engineering, and math. We're looking for girls who are going to schools who are engineers. Now, it hasn't been obviously, the highest priority or the highest percentages in the past, but we're increasing the percentages in the United States, and those opportunities are definitely out there for women to join the workforce. Our deputy administrator at NASA is a woman, Deva Newman, who's here in India, as a matter of fact. Our head of Johnson Space Center is also a woman, Ellen Ochoa, another engineer and scientist. And these fields are coming up all over, and I see that there's many opportunities, and I don't know why people wouldn't choose them if they feel inclined and they like them.
So I'll be opening up the floor to questions, but I'd just like to start off with one myself. So with, environmental disaster looming and the fear of a nuclear holocaust, the people say that the only way man can survive is if they colonize other planets. Do you think we're going to have biospheres or whatever colonies a la Martian anytime soon?
I'm not positive very soon. I think we have a lot to do. And, I think part of the thing you were talking about is STEM fields. If we're interested in doing that, if we really feel that that is necessary because we're going to need that at some point in time, we have a lot in front of us. One of the things when I was a kid, I thought that everything was already invented or discovered. I'm happy to find out and tell you that there's a whole lot more to discover and find out. So if we're going to go that way, I think the head of SpaceX, Elon Musk, is very interested in trying to understand how to colonize Mars. There's a huge wave of things that we need to do. Right now, we're operating a low Earth orbit, which means we're about 250 miles above the Earth. Operating on the International Space Station. We haven't sent a spacecraft with people farther than low Earth orbit for quite some time. We're getting ready to do that with the Orion spacecraft. Probably around 2021, 2023, we'll have the first manned vehicle, Orion, that will take a lap around the moon and then back to Earth. So it's going to be, it's a long road right there. And then, I think the pathway, if we're going to go looking at maybe Mars or other planets, we should use what's in our backyard first. We have the moon right there, which is not too far away or too long in communications. I think we'll need to try and test out some of the ideas that we have in the lunar area on the surface, maybe build a habitat, maybe understand how all that's going to work. But we have a lot to do between here and there, which means we have a lot of people to employ that we need to get to work. A lot of the kids that are in high school and college right now, if they're interested, this is where there is a gap, and we need to fill that with people in STEM fields.
Sunita ji, have you become more spiritual after your space trip? And how do you see the violence happening in our planet?
I think you can't help but become a little bit more spiritual when you have the opportunity to look at the planet from that view. When you're looking down at the planet and seeing also, and then looking the other way where there isn't our planet and there's a lot of empty space before you see the next planet out there, and you know that this is where people live and your family is. And your dog and your husband and your friends that, yeah, well, maybe, but you realize that this is it, right now, as far as we know, this is the only place that we are. And we are so lucky that we actually have a beautiful planet Earth to live on. And you wonder, how the heck are we so lucky? When you look out at all those stars out there, probably there's something out there that resembles life. Who knows? I don't know. But for all you know, is this is our place. And so you can't help but become a little spiritual and recognize that some of the things that we think about here on Earth, like there's a traffic jam, or, I want to get a cup of coffee and I'm, in a bad mood or whatever. It's really trivial. And you wonder sometimes about people who are fighting and things like that. Like, is this really necessary? This is the only planet that we have, and we're making a little bit of a mess of it. We should all be a little bit more friendly to each other and not take things so seriously, and just be happy that we actually have this planet to live on. So I think in the spiritual way, as well as in the philosophical way, I don't let things bother me so much, even my husband's shoes that he leaves messily in the house. I just don't let things bother me as much at all.
What message you have for young aspiring girls like you, like young girls in India who want to be an astronaut like you, and they have like big dreams, but they live in the rural areas, and maybe like it's their parents who decide their future. They don't have that much freedom to like be an astronaut or go to Mount Everest. So what message you have for such young girls who consider you as a role model?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest message is, why not do whatever you want to do? And I say that I think I'm a little overwhelmed actually being here, so I will apologize because everyone's so nice and complimentary, and I feel like I'm just the average guy, average person. And I'm serious, and it's very interesting because I don't see what I've done as amazingly extraordinary, so I can see what I've done in every little girl I see. It's no different. I think you just have to have a little bit of determination, a little bit of hard skin, tough skin when somebody tells you you're not doing something right, or when you even do a failure yourself. I'll be the first one to tell you, I failed 2 college courses. I wasn't a AAA student by any stretch of the imagination, but you sit back and you learn from that, and you go, I made a mistake. Why did I make a mistake? Well, I didn't study first and foremost, or I didn't get it, and I didn't ask a question why I didn't get it. So that's my fault. But I learned from that, and I said, you know what? I'm going to take that class.
Sunita, you've described a lot about your studies, and we understand that you need a lot of physical endurance to be up there. You also hold a record for the maximum number of spacewalks, and you have that enormous suit on you. So could you maybe just describe to us what it feels like getting into that suit? And I know that suit can do a lot of things. And what exactly happened outside when that camera got away from you, and something like that, because
Sure.
it's really quite magical. We're never going to look at the moon in the same way. We know you've been on it now. So if you could just tell us something about the suit and about your walk and when the camera got away from you.
Sure. So spacewalks are interesting. I think they're every emotion a human being can have. You're prepared and you're excited about this. This is sort of the epitome of being an astronaut, is actually being able to do a spacewalk. I was on my first flight during the construction of the space station, so a little bit of a construction worker. So we got to do 4 spacewalks during that time. And then my second flight, after the space station had been up for a while, of course, like every house and every car, things start to break. And so you have to go outside and fix them. So we ended up doing 3 more spacewalks during that time. But the camera situation was on my first one. And I think the first one of everything is the most memorable, right? So you're all excited, you're suiting up, you're getting all dressed, and there's people who are helping you, because first you sort of put your pants on, then you get into the hard upper torso and connect the pants, then put gloves on, and then your helmet on. And there's a process that you have to go through to get all of the nitrogen out of your bloodstream, because you're ending up breathing 100% oxygen. It's sort of like scuba diving and making sure you don't get the bends. And so it takes a little while to purge all the nitrogen out of your bloodstream. So all that anticipation while your suit is all getting checked out, ready to go. And finally the door opens, and the first EVA guy, the EV1, went out, and I went out after that. I was EV2 on that particular spacewalk, and my mom tells me, she's like, hi. And the first guy goes out head first, and the second guy goes out legs first. So the first guy, Bob Kirby, goes out head first and goes to work, and then I'm actually handing him some things. So my legs are sticking out of the hatch, and I'm handing him some stuff. And my mom tells me afterwards, it looked like you got stuck in there. What happened? Were you moving around? Your little legs are dangling out there. And I said, no, I was busy. I was doing something, giving him some stuff that he was getting ready to move. And then once you start and you go out, luckily for me, on my first spacewalk, it was nighttime. So you have your little headlamps on right here and your hands are in front of you and you're moving around the space station. You get to where you're working, you start to work and you're nervous. You want everything to go right. And, something maybe doesn't go right at first. So you're really frustrated and then finally works again. So you're super happy. And then all of a sudden the sun comes up and you see the earth zipping below you and you're holding on for dear life going, oh my God, I am really outside flying formation on this thing at 17,000 miles an hour. And you just close your eyes and get to work again and okay, just calm down. It's okay. And then everything works absolutely perfectly. So you're happy as heck. And then you're translating and you're ahead of the timeline and then your camera flies away and you're like, this is terrible. So it's like up and down. And then of course you're out there for you're probably in the suit about 8 hours, but outside about 6 hours. And so of course you have to go to the bathroom and your belly hurts. And then you finally go to the bathroom and then you're fine. And it's one thing after another. So I'm talking fast because I'm trying to sum up 6 to 8 hours of emotion in just about 2 minutes. It is every emotion I think a human being can have. And you come back in and you're exhausted, but you're so happy that A, you both got in, B, all of the tasks that you had to do outside were done. You didn't hopefully lose too many things, just a camera or something here and there. And that was unfortunate, but that was actually an engineering flaw. Our cameras were on these small screws that have only a couple threads on them. And if you move it around enough times, it's going to come undone. So we actually came up with a whole nother way of what we call tethering the camera to you. So that was a good thing. So we didn't lose other very important stuff later on. So it is just an amazing event. And I think I took it for granted on my first spacewalk that I always had somebody else out there who was the most experienced guy. So on my second flight, when I was EV1 and the experienced guy, you also then had that feeling on your shoulders of, oh gosh, I'm the guy in charge. And at the end of every spacewalk, it's sort of like you just want to finish and you want to make sure you and your partner get back to the airlock, get back inside, get hooked up, and you're all safe. That's the most important thing of the whole thing. Actually, I was talking to our management and I said, it's the things that we do outside are actually not the most important thing. It's most important is getting in the suit correctly, getting outside, and getting back, and making sure everybody's okay. So it's definitely a growing experience, an amazing experience. Like I said, I think it's the epitome of most astronauts' careers that they like to do a spacewalk at some point in time. But I'm getting older, and I think I'm ready to hand it over to the young guys.
Are you like scared also when you're doing these spacewalks, or it's like a piece of cake for you?
Oh, I think you're always a little bit scared. I think though what you are is you're confident in the equipment that you're using, the tools that you're using. You learn all about that beforehand, and we practice in a big pool. And so the technical aspects of the particular job, you feel confident and ready to go do that. I think everything, at least for myself, I compartmentalize a little bit. When you're out doing this types of task, you're focused right on that task. But like I said, at the very end, I think it came rushing back to me like, wow, I'm in a very dangerous place and I need to make sure that me and my partner get back into the airlock very safely. So I think there's always a little amount of fear that's going on in the background.
The closest we're ever going to get to space is through Christopher Nolan movies. We watch Interstellar and we watch Gravity and we see Sandra Bullock being amazing. But have you seen these movies? Do they come close to the experience at all?
I have seen. I actually haven't seen Interstellar. That's the only one I haven't seen. But I've seen Gravity and I've seen The Martian more recently, and they're great movies. Absolutely great. And Gravity has some of the best scenery, and probably the best way that Hollywood has recreated what it looks like from being in space. And so I give that movie high marks for that. The Martian is pretty interesting. It has a lot of very cool aspects of it. I think just the whole idea of being alone and being frustrated. The way I was talking about a spacewalk, I think you could feel that from Matt Damon's portrayal of the gentleman on Mars when he was just getting frustrated when things weren't working right. But then all of a sudden something was working right. So they did a very good, both of those movies have done really good jobs of trying to show what it's like to be in space. Of course, there's some inaccuracies of all these things, but one of the quotes my dad has mentioned before from quoting Einstein is, imagination is sort of paving the way for what's going to come up next in life. And so I think movies are for that. The movies are for opening the imagination to think about, like, I have this base of knowledge right here, but what else can we do? And how else can we just, for the moment, forget about the facts and just pretend where we want to be in the future and project where we might want to be in the future and think of the possibilities. And I think that's one of the really great things about movies. It allows you to just think about your imagination and create what's next. And so I think there's a lot of good to that.
How do you see, ma'am, commercialization of these space flights? Because two more companies have come up, SpaceX and Virgin Galactic. They have already provided such flights. So how do you see the prospects for the commercialization? I'm a scientist. I was wondering whether sometimes Indian scientists may go and do something.
So there's a lot of different companies out there who are in the commercial sector who are starting to adventure into the space business. More recently, I'm part of this group that's working with the commercial companies, Boeing and SpaceX, to provide transportation to astronauts to low Earth orbit. But there are other companies also who are in the running for that contract. Virgin wasn't one in particular, but there's Blue Origin, Sierra Nevada, other companies out there. Virgin has on their mind, I was just actually reading about them, things, everybody can read. I don't have any special intel about Virgin, just read on the news about them, how they're going to start up again their line with their next spaceship to hopefully take tourists into space or people into space for that opportunity, which I really hope is going to happen. They've gone through a hard lesson. I think it was a little bit over a year ago when they had a crash, and for them, they've changed some engineering things on their spacecraft, and then tightened up their procedures a little bit more and tried to understand where they had some deficits. But I hope they really have that opportunity because their spacecraft is pretty unique and pretty neat. And to be able to go, sort of like I mentioned, the perspective about the Earth, if to be able for people to have that opportunity to go and see the Earth from that view, I think would just be beneficial to people here on Earth. And so I'm all for it. I hope there's a lot of companies that will be able to take people to space, at least, as I've mentioned before, for a lap around the planet. I think we all need that to ground ourselves a little bit and realize that, this is our home. We have a small little atmosphere that's protecting us from the dangers of space. And all of us live here. Whether we like it or not, we all should get along down here. So I think I'm all for these private companies taking people to space.
My question is how aware you were about the gender identity during your career? Or was it like you were madly chasing the space exploration and world got a pleasant byproduct as the symbol of women empowerment?
Yeah, of course I was aware. I mean, how could you not be aware when there was mostly men all around you? But, I don't think I thought twice about it because I thought of the tasks that I had to do, right? And the tasks that I had to do, I didn't feel any reason why I couldn't do that task. Spacewalking, and one of the things I think if maybe you've heard me say before is, I don't think the helicopter knew if I was a girl or a guy, or the spaceship knew if I was a girl or a guy, or the spacesuit for that matter. So those particular things that you're operating, they don't know. So why should it matter, right? Spacesuits are big and they're heavy. They're about 300 pounds. But again, when we put them on, they're in space. And so they don't weigh anything. They're a little bit difficult to work with. So, but that what you have to do is maybe make sure that you're strong enough to work that suit and understand how it works. Maybe a little bit more than the guy who's really big and strong who doesn't have to think about it as much. So where the areas are that you have to compensate for, and that's all. And I think I mentioned that, if you're confident and competent at what you're doing and you just do the best that you can, I don't think the people around you could help but give you respect for the job that you do if you do a good job. And don't compromise yourself or your values, and just do what you think is right. And I think that's, for me, that was how I went around that. My husband was also a helicopter pilot in the Navy and in a sister squadron of mine. And so it was interesting, coming home at night and listening to his stories and listening to my stories. I mentioned a little bit about being in the squadron, and it's tough when you're like 25 and you're really trying to identify yourself and you're trying to be the best guy on the block, and you're really worried about that thing, that stuff. And my husband would come back and talk about how him and the guys did this, that, the other thing. And, like I mentioned, there was only 4 women in my squadron. 2 of them are deployed, and there was only 2 of us that were there. And you stick out at like a sore thumb. And sometimes people don't want to be associating with those people who are sticking out like a sore thumb. But you know what? You don't worry about it, and you just continue on. And like I mentioned, the most rewarding thing was actually becoming a detachment officer in charge, and that was great. And all those people who I got to deploy with for that operation, I felt like they were like my brothers and sisters. And the same with when I was up in space as well. So I think there's definitely going to be hard times. I'm not going to deny that, right? I think everybody's gone through some difficult times, being potentially a woman in a field that's not occupied primarily by women. But like I mentioned earlier, also just a little tough skin, and you can get through that.
But was space not more of a gender neutralizing force in that sense?
It has to be, right? You have no choice.
What it's like when you simulate, but when you actually go there, what is it like to float in space?
So there's no real good simulation of floating in space except for the zero-G aircraft, which does parabolas. And it does maybe in a 2-hour time frame, 30 or 40 parabolas. Each parabola is about 30 seconds, but it's not really like being in microgravity the whole time. So it is and it isn't. It's fun because you get to like fly from one end of the space, from the aircraft to the other, but then you fall down right away. But living in space is different. Living in space is like, you can't get away from it. You are there, you're always floating. And with that comes some of the downsides, like I mentioned, about bone density and muscle mass issues. But it's fun, it's awesome. I mean, rooms are huge, because you don't have to have, like a room like this would just be humongous, because you can utilize all of it. People could be on the ceiling, people be on the floor, people on the walls, all over the place, or floating from one place to another. That's why the space station looks sort of small, but that's really a lot of space when you think about all of the overhead space that you have, right? And so it's fun. It's just fun. I think floating is probably the best thing about being in space. The view is probably the very close second best thing about being in space. And it feels like a bird, like you're a bird. And it made me come back and look at birds a little differently. Like if you watch birds and they're flying, sometimes they like go between branches and stuff, and then they finally fly and land on a branch. And I'm pretty jealous of them, because I know I could do that up in space, but I just can't do it down here. But it's pretty spectacular being able to just fly around. But when you're up in space for a while, you forget what it's like to be here, because that also becomes just the normal way you live. You always float. And at one point in time, I sort of had to shake my head, because there was a module that stuck down from the space station, and I was every day float by it. And one day I thought to myself, wow, if I had to walk, that's a pretty big hole. I have to be careful. I'd have to watch out. I have to jump over that thing. But I just couldn't wrap my brain about how it would feel to walk in that, because I had been floating for so long. And space is nice. It's a nice place to be. But overall, back on Earth. Earth is, like I mentioned, the best things about Earth are, of course, your family and friends and the people that are here and the dog that's here. And also, the wind on your face. When you're up in space, you don't ever get that feeling of wind. There's 16 sunrises and sunsets in a 24-hour period, so it gets a little bit You don't use that as your clock. You use the clock that's on the computer as your clock as for time. But the view of the planet, both in daylight and at night, are different, but both spectacular. You could find yourself looking out the window for quite some time.
What would your definition of the word spaced out mean?
Oh wow.
Not being in space, for sure.
I think I just generally use the classical spaced out, someone who's just not paying attention, I suppose. But maybe it's because
you're paying attention to everything. I mean, you're paying attention to weight, to gender, to power, to empowerment, to all the technical details, to STEM, to everything. So where is the question of being spaced out when you are a person who is made this a profession?
I guess it's a good thing to be spaced out then. In my mind, the classical thing comes to mind initially, spaced out, but maybe it's because you're thinking about everything that else is around you. And one interesting thing about space, being up in space, when we came back, at least when I came back, I was really pretty tired. And you don't realize that, but you're up there for a long time. For example, Scott Kelly and Mikhail Kornienko are up there for almost a year. They're almost getting ready to come back this next month in March. And I'm sure they're both going to be really tired when they get back. I think you don't realize it, that other things are going around all the time in your brain. You know, one of the things that we all think that we can do is multitask, but it's actually really hard for your brain to actually do that. It toggles back and forth. And when you're in space, you can't help but worry about where you are. It's not a nice place to be. You know, outside of that space station is, you know, the vacuum of space, the hot and the cold of space. It's not a place where humans will live. And so I think you're always thinking about in the back of your mind, what are those creaking noises? You know, what do I do if something makes a hole in the space station? What do I do if there's a fire? What do I do if there's one of the ammonia heat exchanger leaks? And so always in the back of your mind are these other procedures that are going on in these things to make sure that you and your teammates are safe. And I think that just mentally drains you. It's not just only physical, but it's mentally. When I came back, it took about 30 days or so until I felt like I finally woke up. And I was, just feeling like I could operate like a normal 16-hour day or so. And I think that's just time. It's just like when people recharge on the weekends, same type of thing. You're working for 5 days, and then you need to recharge. But in space, I don't think you don't really get a break because you're always worried about where you are.
What would your definition of the word spaced out mean?
Oh wow.
Not being in space, for sure.
I think I just generally use the classical spaced out, someone who's just not paying attention, I suppose. But maybe it's because you're
paying attention to everything. I mean, you're paying attention to weight, to gender, to power, to empowerment, to all the technical details, to STEM, to everything. So where is the question of being spaced out when you are a person who is made this a profession?
I guess it's a good thing to be spaced out then. In my mind, the classical thing comes to mind initially, spaced out, but maybe it's because you're thinking about everything that else is around you. And one interesting thing about space, being up in space, when we came back, at least when I came back, I was really pretty tired. And you don't realize that, but you're up there for a long time. For example, Scott Kelly and Mikhail Kornienko are up there for almost a year. They're almost getting ready to come back this next month in March. And I'm sure they're both going to be really tired when they get back. I think you don't realize it, that other things are going around all the time in your brain. You know, one of the things that we all think that we can do is multitask, but it's actually really hard for your brain to actually do that. It toggles back and forth. And when you're in space, you can't help but worry about where you are. It's not a nice place to be. You know, outside of that space station is, the vacuum of space, the hot and the cold of space. It's not a place where humans will live. And so I think you're always thinking about in the back of your mind, what are those creaking noises? What do I do if something makes a hole in the space station? What do I do if there's a fire? What do I do if there's one of the ammonia heat exchanger leaks? And so always in the back of your mind are these other procedures that are going on and these things to make sure that you and your teammates are safe. And I think that just mentally drains you. It's not just only physical, but it's mentally. When I came back, it took about 30 days or so until I felt like I finally woke up. And I was, just feeling like I could operate like a normal 16-hour day or so. And I think that's just time. It's just like when people recharge on the weekends, same type of thing. You're working for 5 days, and then you need to recharge. But in space, I don't think you don't really get a break because you're always worried about where you are. So maybe that's spaced out. You're distracted.
There's a little story about you when you went up on one of your missions on space that you asked for something spicy. So this is a two-pronged question. I know what you asked for and I know what happened, but I'd like you to tell the audience, what's the food like up there? And what happened to that? And what happened to that spicy thing that you called for?
So the food is sort of bland, and it's gotten a little blander, unfortunately, but it's better for us that way. So we've determined that part of the bone density contributor or decreasing of bone density contributor is salt, and so we've taken some of the salt out of the food over the past decade that we've been flying the space station, and that's okay, but it makes it even more bland than it had been in the past. And so one way to make food a little bit better, spicy, is of course you can't really use pouring salt, so salt was liquid anyway, or some type of paste. And we had pesto paste up there. We had like sriracha sauce, hot sauce up there. And I had asked for some wasabi because wasabi is always sort of tasty, particularly if you're eating some fish. And my family your families are able to send you some things in a care package, and that's always really fun too. So on the weekends you can share your native foods or your home foods with the other people in the crew. And so my folks packed up some wasabi that wasn't just straight up wasabi, thank God, because that would have been very dangerous. But it was wasabi that was like mayonnaise, a little bit more sauce wasabi. But any type of plastic containers have this little silver cover foil on top, and so you have to undo the cap and then take that foil off, and then the sauce comes out, right? And you usually have to squish it. Well, obviously pressure here and pressure up in space is sometimes different, and the transportation of the jars was probably went through some pressure changes and stuff like that. So I'm ready. I have my little tuna fish that I wanted to have some wasabi with and make it pretend like it was sushi. And I was like, okay, this is going to be really fun. I can't wait. And I was in the Russian segment at the time, and I have the jar in my hand, and I'm opening the top because I know I have to take that top off, and I'm opening the top, and and that was fine. Then I start peeling back the foil, and the stuff starts shooting out because of the pressure differential. And I have my hands full. I'm trying to stop it, and I'm getting hit by it. I'm making it hit me because I didn't want it to hit the wall behind me, because then I'd have to clean up the wall. At least if it just hit me, I just have to clean me up. But trying not to get it in my eyes, and it was a little bit of a wasabi mess. I had a sweatshirt on at the time, and I tried to clean it, but we don't really have a washing machine up there, so you can only just sort of wipe the stuff off. And after like going to sleep with the sweatshirt on and smelling that wasabi for a couple days, I decided that's enough, and I had to throw my sweatshirt away. But so the attack of the wasabi was pretty horrible.
I believe you also took samosas up there.
Samosas, absolutely, yeah. And they came up, unfortunately, just at the very end of my flight. So, but one good thing about that, I got to share them with the guys who just came when I was sleeping.
I believe you had taken Ganesha figurine,
of course,
and then Bhagavad Gita.
Yes,
and
yep.
some samosas.
Mm-hmm.
So did it help you in some way, like giving some strength or some good feeling
Absolutely. One of the nice things, we have a sleep station. Everybody has their own place. And in my place, I had a little ohm above where I was sleeping. I had my Ganesh and the Bhagavad Gita, my first flight, and the Upanishad, a small Upanishad, the second flight. And, I would go at night and read just a little bit. I didn't really want to read in space because you can read in space and you can read it on Earth. So I wanted to do things that were unique to being in space. So I had my father find me some very small books so I could just read a couple lines every night. And it was nice. It was a good thing to do. It just sort of one of those, I think, a calming thing to center you a little bit and bring you back to really what's important.
It's life-risking decision, and I don't know how you all dealt with it.
I think the hardest part of all of this was actually getting selected. We're just selecting a new group in 2017, and just recently we got over 18,000 applicants. And I'm very happy that I didn't apply with this group, and I applied a couple years ago. There was a couple fewer applicants. But I think that was the biggest hurdle, really, is just getting in. And I mentioned some of the things about that, like when you come to NASA to do the interview, it's not only an interview, it's also a medical exam. One of the reasons I think I try to emphasize health and just the idea of physical fitness being part of your daily lifestyle. So it was very interesting. It was very funny when I got selected to be an astronaut. I was actually I was on a ship. I was in the Navy, of course, and they were having a hard time making the phone call to the ship because we were on a ship. And they finally got through, and I was not, of course, with my family because I was living on the ship at the time. So I tried to call my husband, but he was nowhere to be found. So because he's a police officer, so he was out doing something. So I couldn't get a hold of him. I left a message and said, "Hey, I have some good news," and that was like all I said. And then let that go. And then I called my parents, and my mom goes, "I don't really understand what you're saying. I have a tennis match. I'll call you back in about an hour." And I'm like, "What are all these? They're missing it. This is something that's really exciting for me. They don't get it." So it was sort of funny because I didn't really tell a lot of people that I was applying. I told people that I was going down for the interview, but it's like, okay, sure, that's a chance. It's not going to happen. So when it happened, I think there was a lot of disbelief, and even from parents and my husband, to like, is that really going to happen? And even myself, honestly, I got selected in 1998, and I flew at the end of 2006. And of course, there'd been some things that that delayed that. Yeah. One of them, of course, being the Columbia accident and us losing some friends of ours, which really put it in the face of everybody. Like, wow, this is really actually a very dangerous job, and don't underestimate the dangers. But then it took on there was a long time until we started flying again. And even when I was assigned to that mission, and even when we walked out to the launch pad, to be honest with you, I didn't personally feel like it was really going to happen. And we had what they call a scrub. We had a cancellation for the first launch attempt. So we all came back in, and I was like, "See, this is just what we've done. This is just training again. This is not really ever going to happen." And I called we're in quarantine at the time, so you can't go see your family. But I called my family. I'm like, "Oh, don't worry about it. We'll see what happens." And so 2 days later was actually the day we launched. And I don't think any of us were ready because we walked out to the launch pad and it was pouring rain, and thought, "Oh, the weather's going to be bad again." But when the countdown kept going and going and going, all of us in the spacecraft were like, "Oh my God, we're really going to go! We're really going to go this time!" And I mean, it's 8 minutes of just pure fun and excitement because it's what you worked for, and it actually really came to fruition. But it didn't. I don't think it dawned on anybody in my family and myself, for that matter, that it was actually going to happen until that moment. Finally got to the space station after a rendezvous, 2 days, and there's a phone we can call through the computer back home. And I talked to my sister, and she goes, "There was a lot of fire." That's all I have to tell you. That rocket had a lot of fire, and I wasn't sure what you guys, if you were going or what you were going to do. She said there wasn't a dry eye there because they all realized for the first time it was going to happen. So it's an amazing adventure, and if you want to do it, if you have daughters or sons who are interested in being part of the program, it's definitely rewarding, and it's not scary when you think about being part of something bigger than yourself.